2023 has been a lackluster release year to say the least. Aside from the typical CGI-filled superhero films, overstretched action flicks, and downright boring remakes and revivals, few films have been able to stand out as truly captivating theater experiences. So, when a release that focuses not only on an important issue, but is also not surrounded by the clout-chasing lies of a twinkle-haired harlot, it rightfully captures audiences in the best way possible. Sound of Freedom is a biopic detailing the beginning of Operation Underground Railroad, an anti-child trafficking operation that was headed by former U.S. Special Agent Tim Ballard, founded in 2013 and saw its most prolific bust in 2014 in Colombia. The film was allegedly planned as a documentary from the start before being re-envisioned as a feature-length film that was actually completed 5 years ago. However, the rights were acquired by Disney during their 20th Century Fox acquisition and immediately shelved, leading the filmmakers to raise the funds to buy it back in March 2023 and distribute it under the newly formed Angel Studios. Despite the hurdles that this film is very obviously facing, word of mouth is pushing Sound of Freedom to be one of 2023's hits, knocking out the expected moneymakers with ease. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised to be seated in a full theater on a weekday evening, a first for me since Avengers Endgame came out in 2019. Sound of Freedom doesn't shy away from immediately painting in part the reality that some experience in these situations, as we watch a lower-class Honduran father conned into believing his young children are potential stars by an attractive talent agent, only to have them unceremoniously ripped from his life and disappear forever. Cut to the introduction of Tim Ballard, played by Jim Caviezel, where he and his covert team are busting a prolific abuser in Southern California. Turns out this creep version of Vector actually has some ties to much larger networks, and Ballard uses this to his advantage, tricking the abuser into believing he too is of the same persuasions, eventually leading Ballard to what becomes the turning moment of his career, finding the child offered by this abuser, of whom came from South America. With the help of border agents, Ballard is able to find the boy, Miguel, who had been nicknamed Teddy Bear by the adult that bought him. Upon finding and rescuing Miguel, Ballard learns that not only had the boy been subjected to some harrowing abuse, but that he also had a sister that was taken, the same girl that we see in the introduction of the film named Rocio. It's here Ballard realizes that he has to rescue this girl, not just for her sake, but to resolve himself of all the demons he has carried in the 12 years that he's been arresting abusers. It's a chance for salvation almost, in that while he has arrested countless perpetrators, he's never managed to rescue a single child until Miguel. With some resistance from the Department of Homeland Security, Ballard travels to Colombia and works alongside Colombian intelligence to locate Rocio. A week into his stay, his superiors push back, telling him to abort the mission, which not only leads to Ballard taking out a second mortgage on his home to finance the trip, but also walking away from his career altogether, and pushes him into concocting a new plan. Create a luxury sex hotel in order to not only locate Rocio, but permanently put her captors and sellers away for life. While the plan is executed almost flawlessly and ends with the rescue of over 50 children and arrests of almost a dozen perps, Rocio isn't there. During the interrogation of one of the island perps, Ballard and his team learn that Rocio has been sold to a man simply known as the Scorpion, and he resides within rebel territory, which is not only considered off-limits to civilians, but government officials of any kind, with the exception of international health organizations. Deep in the jungles of Colombia, Ballard poses as a UN health official, gaining access to rebel territory and thankfully rescuing little Rocio. The Sound of Freedom closes with the heart-wrenching reunion of this girl with her father and brother Miguel. A brief plot summary, yes, and one that does not come close to the weight and gravity this film offers. As alluded to by the real Ballard and Caviezel in previous interviews, Sound of Freedom can be classed in the same category as other semi-biographical and historical films like Schindler's List and Hotel Rwanda, with the biggest difference being that Sound of Freedom dramatizes an ongoing crisis and is somewhat amateur in comparison in the way it's made.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
But Vex, how can you say that about a film focused on child sex trafficking? Let me clarify. Sound of Freedom does a phenomenal job in getting its message and story across. The closest thing I can compare this movie to is Taken, which, while dealing with the same subject matter, focused more on being an action thriller as opposed to a dramatic thriller. Additionally, the use of actresses that definitely look more adult lessens the impact of said subject matter in Taken. So, in that respect, Sound of Freedom is already off to a great start in utilizing more realistic casting choices. The intimate shots that focus on Rocio's pain or Ballard's struggles really evokes emotions when the script pushes for it. And in several moments throughout the film, I felt genuine sadness and deep disgust at what I was seeing on the screen. However, director Alejandro Monteverde shows that he is a little bit novice in this respect, as for all the scenes that do successfully carry emotion, there are just as many that struggle to, and if any, somewhat destroy the intentions being carried forward through this film. For instance, there's a scene where Ballard plays the part of a rich party boy in order to gain the business of some very notable traffickers. The entire situation is meant to not only have us buy Ballard and his sidekick Vampiro's covers, but understand that the wealthiest individuals have the largest influence on the growth and continuation of the global child sex trafficking trade. That power is completely lost as the shot, setting, and tone all scream generic South American environment, akin to a Narcos set and not much more. The emotion on the faces of Ballard and Vampiro are lost within the shot, further throwing off the pacing of this entire film in some instances. It's in this and several others throughout that I feel The Sound of Freedom would have benefited off the style of a director such as Denis Villeneuve, whose work with Polytechnique and Prisoners paints dark and serious subject matters superbly with the camera. I know y'all will say, well, what about Dune? And I haven't seen that yet because Timothy Swiss Chalet has the off-putting facial geometry of a Tetris stack. A greater emphasis on Ballard's family would have also been appreciated. Ballard has stated time and time again how important his family, specifically his wife, was in bringing the operation to fruition, and while the family influence is not completely dismissed, the further exploration would have turned Ballard from an invincible hero to a relatable father figure whose strengths and weaknesses come from his admirable heart. Instead, we basically have the Iron Man of anti-child trafficking, which, while is not bad, can diminish the effect of some of the film's most important moments. Just when you think there might be a time where he'll feel knocked down, the emotion of that same instance is lost when an immediate solution is also found within seconds, and furthermore, Ballard seems to basically be invincible when it comes to combat against some of the most unfathomable individuals. Minor criticisms aside, there are many things The Sound of Freedom does well. The movie is very well edited, not skating over key developments that have an influence on the events, and in its messaging tells a complete story. The accounts that are dramatized don't hold back any punches for the sake of keeping the audience comfortable. And quite honestly, that is a massive strength for everyone behind this film, as child sex trafficking is often dulled in films to make way for other plot elements. Co-writers Monteverde and Rod Barr very clearly capture the pain of everyone involved. Whether it's little Rocio after losing her virginity, or Vampiro describing how he got involved in saving children, or even Ballard when he recognizes time and time again that this is his life's purpose despite every hurdle that is thrown at him. The jumps between Rocio's experience and Ballard's journey complement each other well, showing not only the horror these children endure, but also how it affects those who fight for them down to their very core. Whether you're a parent or not, the strong emotions portrayed through each and every character in this movie speak to everyone, as at one point or another, each of us have felt some semblance of that same pain or hardship. Jim Caviezel does a phenomenal job portraying Tim Ballard, straight down to the moments where he breaks down, of which there are many. The real knockout performance comes from Cristal Aparicio, whose portrayal of Rocio steals the movie and will have you on a roller coaster of sadness, horror, and hope all at once. I won't spoil much, but her final scene in the movie had everyone in my theater tearing up at the exact same moment. Lucas Avila, or Miguel, also does a wonderful job, and the casting of these two siblings are a reminder that while Ballard was the hero of this, the story is of this brother and sister whose story reflect that of millions, a point that Jim Caviezel further emphasizes during the closing credits. Above all, Sound of Freedom does not dull the subject matter for the comfort of its potential audience, and this is why so many are praising it. While not a gritty horror slasher nor a high-octane action flick, Sound of Freedom is an accurate portrayal of the horrors of child sex trafficking, which, despite what the media has been telling you the last 2 weeks, has been well documented, reported, and reliably detailed for decades. It's also good to remember that the people shitting on this film also thought that there was absolutely nothing inappropriate about cuties. Makes you wonder, huh? Sound of Freedom doesn't allow the viewer to imagine the horror, but places you right in it, and throughout its 2-hour runtime will make you equal parts queasy and uncomfortable. It's a film that, while it doesn't stand out as a landmark in its technical aspects, certainly does in its performances and unabashed messaging, and for that reason alone is a must-see. Anyways, that's all I have for you. Thanks for stopping by, and stay frosty, friends.